Hello and welcome to India Reads. My name is Pradeep and we're reading The Enchantress of Florence. We've reached a stage where the yellow hat traveler, whose name initially was Ucello and now he calls himself Mogor, has slowly made his way to the palace and is getting closer and closer to the emperor. He's almost crossed his way through the guards and has got an audience with the emperor thanks to the perfumes which the skeleton had uh, dabbled on him, and it was slowly attracting all the people one set after the other. So he's reached into the innermost layer and is possibly going to meet the emperor, or maybe the last person who might take him to the emperor. Let's read and find out. This was Abul Fazl, the man who knew everything except foreign languages and the many uncouth tongues of India, all of which eluded him, so he cut an unusual monoglot figure in that multi tongued babble of a court. Historian, spy master, brightest of the nine stars, and second closest confidant of the most frightening man in the world, with no exception, Abul Fazl knew the true story of the creation of the world, which he had heard, he said, from the angels themselves. And he knew too how much fodder the horses in the imperial stables were allowed to eat each day, and the approved recipe for biryani, and why the slaves had been renamed disciples, and the history of the Jews, and the order of the heavenly spears, and the seven dragons of degrees of sin, the nine schools, the 16 predicaments, the 18 sciences, and the 42 unclean things. He was also apprised through his network of informants of every single thing that went on in every language within the walls of Fatehpur Sikri. All whispered secrets, all the treacheries, all the indulgences, all the promiscuities, so that every person within these walls who was also at his mercy or at the mercy of his pen, of which King Abdullah of Bukhara had said that it was more to be feared than Akbar's sword, saying that the most frightening man in the world, with no exception, who was afraid of nobody, who was, of course, the emperor, his lord. Abul Fazl stood in profile like a king and did not turn to look at the newcomer. He remained silent for so long as it became plain that an insult was intended. The ambassador of Queen Elizabeth understood that this was the first test he had to pass. He too remained silent, and in that dreadful hush, each man learned about the other. You think you're telling me nothing, the traveler thought, but I see from your magnificence and rudeness, from your corpulence and stern visage, that you are an exemplar of the world in which hedonists coexist with suspicion. Violence, for this silence is a form of violent assault, walks hand in hand with the contemplation of beauty, and that the weakness of the universe of overindulgence and vindictiveness is vanity. Vanity is the enchantment in whose spell you are held captive, and it is through my knowledge of that vanity that I will achieve my goal. Then the most frightening man in the world, with one exception, spoke at last, as if in reply to the other thoughts. Excellency, he said sardonically, I perceive that you have perfumed yourself with a fragrance devised for the seduction of kings, and I deduce that you are not entirely innocent of our ways. In fact, not an innocent at all. I did not trust you when I first heard you some moments ago, and now that I've smelt you, I trust you even less. The yellow-haired Mongol de Amor intuited that Abul Fazl was the original author of the spellbook of the Unguents, whose formulas Mohini the skeleton had become adept at using, so that these olfactory enchantments had no power over him, and as a result, they lost their influence over everyone else as well. The guards, with their goofy grins at the four entrances of the house of the private audience suddenly came to their senses. The veiled slave girls waiting to serve the august company lost the air of dreamy eroticism, and the newcomer understood that he was like a man stripped naked beneath the all seeing gaze of the king's favorite, and that only truth or something as convincing as the truth would save him now. When the ambassador of King Philip of Spain came to visit us, Abul Fazl reflected, he brought a full retinue and elephants laden with gifts and 21 horses of the finest Arab stock and jewels. And by no means did he show up on a bullock cart and spend the night in a whorehouse with a movement so thin that one can wonder whether she was a woman at all. My master, Lord Hawksbank of the Ilk, unfortunately joined God and his angels as we made landfall at Surat. And the newcomer replied. On his deathbed, he bade me fulfill the duty with which Her Majesty had charged him. Alas, the ship's company was swarming with rogues, and before his body was cold, they committed to plunder and ransack his quarters in search of whatever value my good master had possessed. I confess that it was only by my good fortune that I escaped with my life and the Queen's letter as well. For knowing me to be my master's honest servant, they would have cut my throat had I stayed to defend Lord Hawksback's property. I fear not that now that his remains may never receive a Christian burial, but I am proud to have arrived at your great city to discharge this responsibility which has now become mine. The Queen of England, Abul Fazl, mused, has been, I believe, no friend to our friend, the illustrious King of Spain. Spain is a Philistine bully, the other improvised swiftly, whereas England is the home of art and beauty and Glorina herself. Do not be blinded by the blandishments of Philip the Dull. Like must speak to like, and it is Elizabeth of England who is a true reflection of the Emperor's generosity, greatness, and style. Warming to his theme, he explained that the faraway red-haired queen was nothing less than the western mirror of the Emperor himself. She was Akbar in the female form, and he, the Shahenshah, the King of Kings, could be said to be an Eastern Elizabeth, mustachioed, non-virginal, but in the essence of her greatness, they were the same. Abul Fazl stiffened. You dare to say that my master is no higher than a woman? He said softly. You are fortunate indeed to be holding a scroll which bears, as I see, the authentic seal of the Crown of England, and therefore obliges us to give you safe conduct. Otherwise, it would be my inclination to reward such insolence by throwing you to the rogue elephants we keep tethered to the nearby tree to get rid of unacceptable swines. The Emperor is famous throughout the world for his generous appreciation of women, said Mogol Or. I am sure he will not be insulted as the jewel of East to be likened with another great jewel, whatever her sex. The Nazarene sages sent to court by the Portuguese of Goa speak poorly of your jewel, Abul Fazl shrugged. They say that she is against God and a puny ruler who will soon be crushed. And they say that hers is a nation of thieves and that you are in all probability a spy. The Portuguese are pirates, said Mogor del Amor. They are bucanas as scoundrels. No wise man must trust what they say. Father Aquaviva of the Society of Jesus is an Italian like yourself, Abul Fazl rejoined. And Father Montserrat, his companion, comes from Spain. If they come here under the flag of scurrilous Portuguese, the other insisted that Portuguese pirate dogs is what they've become. Good laughter broke out from the place above their heads, as if the gods were mocking him. Have mercy, great Munshi, a huge voice boomed. Let the young man live at least until we have read the message he brings. The silken canopies fell away to the corners of the chamber, and there above them, seated on the cushioned top of the sandstone tree, in the position of the royal ease and dissolving into mirthful guffaws, was Abul Fath Jalaluddin Muhammad Akbar, the great Mughal himself, revealed to view and looking like a grand parrot on an outsized perch. He had woken up in an oddly fretful mood, and not even his beloved's most skilful ministrations had calmed him. In the middle of the night, a disoriented crow had somehow entered Queen Jodhabai's bedchamber, and the royal couple had been awoken by a terrified cawing, which the sleep-heavy emperor heard as an intimation of the end of the world. For one terrifying instant, the black wind brushed his cheek. By this time, the servants shooed the crow out. Again, the emperor's nerves were jangling. After that, his sleep was filled with portents. At one point, he seemed to see the black beak of that apocalyptic crow reaching into his chest and pulling out his heart to eat it. Hind of Mecca on the battlefield of Uhud had eaten the heart of the fallen Hamza, the Prophet's uncle. If that mighty hero could fall to a cowardly javelin, then he too might be felled at any moment by an arrow from the dark, flying as a crow flies, ugly, deadly, and black. If a crow could get past the defenses of his guards and flap its wings on his face, then might not a murderer be able to do the same? Thus, full of forebodings of death, he was defenseless against the advent of love. The arrival of the rogue, calling himself the English ambassador, had intrigued him, and after he ordered Abul Fazl to have some sport with the fellow, his spirits began to lighten. Abul Fazl, in reality the most compassionate of men, was better at performing ferocity than anyone in Sikri, and the emperor listened to the fun below him. Hidden as he was above the heads of the two men, the interrogator and the interrogated, the clouds of the night dissipated at last and were forgotten. The charlatan had acquitted himself quite well, he thought. When he pulled the tasseled cords that released his silk canopies and revealed his presence to the men below, he was in a thoroughly affable frame of mind, but quite unprepared for the emotion that assailed him when his eyes met those of the yellow-haired visitor. It was love, or felt like it. The emperor's pale pulse quickened like an infatuated young girl's. His breathing deepened, and the color rose in his cheeks. How handsome the young man was! How sure of himself! How proud! And there was something in him that could be seen, a secret that made him more interesting than 100 courtiers. How old was he? The emperor was not good at judging Firangi faces. He might be as young as 25 or as old as 30, older than our sons, the emperor thought, and too old to be a son to us. And then he wondered that such a thought had come to his head. Was the foreigner some sort of a witch, he asked him. Was he being enchanted by an occult charm? Well, he would go along with it. There was no harm in that. He was too wily to be caught up by any hidden knife or drink poison from a doctored cup. He would follow his feelings to see what had caused them. The absence of surprise is the necessary penalty of life, of power. The emperor had set up elaborate systems and machineries to make sure that he was never surprised about anything. And yet this Mogol, the Amour, had caught him off guard, whether by accident or design. For that reason alone, he deserved to be fully known. Read us the Queen's letter, Akbar commanded, and the ambassador bowed absurdly low, with theatrical flourishes of the wrists, and when he rose up again, the scroll was hanging open, even though neither Akbar nor Abul Fazl had witnessed the breaking of the seal. A sleight of hand artist, the emperor thought, We like that. The charlatan read the letter in English and then translated smoothly into the Persian tongue. Most invincible and most mighty prince, Queen Elizabeth wrote, Lord Zalaluddin Ikchibar, Ikchibaz, King of Kambaya, greeting. Abul Fazl gave a horsey snort of laughter. Jalabdin, he scoffed. And who might this Ikchibar be? The emperor above him slapped his thigh for joy. We are he chortled. We are the Padishah Ikchibar, lord of the fairy tale kingdom of Kambaya. O poor benighted England, we pity thy people, for thy queen is an ignorant dunce. The letter reader paused to allow the laughter to subside. Go on, the emperor waved at him. King Jalabdin commands it. There was more laughter and the discovery of a kerchief to wipe away his tears. The ambassador bowed again, even more elaborately than before, and continued, and by the time he was done, a second spell had been woven. In matters of trade and other purposes of mutual advantage, we ask alliance, he read. It has come to our notice that your majesty has declared himself infallible, and we assure you that we do not question the authoritas of that mighty claim. However, there is one another who claims as much for himself, and he is in no doubt that we are assured that it is this other who is a fraud. We refer, great monarch, to that unworthy priest, the Bishop of Rome, the 13th Gregory of that inglorious Septenance, whose design upon Orient you would be wise not to discount. If he sends priests to Kambaya, China, and Japan, that is not mere holiness, we do assure you. The same bishop is presently preparing war against us, and his Catholic servants are treacherous presents at your court, for they scheme his conquests to come. Beware these lackeys of your rival. Make alliance with us, and we will defend all foes. For I know I have a body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of the King of England too. And I think foul scorn that any pope in Rome should rather dishonor me or my allies me nor my allies neither. For I have not only my own atroz authoritas, but protesta as well, and that potency will make me the victor in the fight. When they are all destroyed and blown away by the four winds, then you shall be glad you made common cause with England. When the ambassador finished reading, the emperor realized that he had fallen in love for the second time within the space of a few minutes, because now he was possessed by great desire for the author of the letter. England's Queen, Abul Fazl, he cried, shall we not marry this great lady without delay? The Virgin Queen, Rani Zelabad Glorina Pahlavi. We think we must have her at once. Excellent idea, said the ambassador, Mogor del Amor. And here in the locket is a picture which she sends you with her affection, regard, and which will bewitch you with her beauty, which surpasses even the beauty of her words. With a flourish of the lace cuffs at his wrist, he produced a golden charm which Abul Fazl took with a look of profound suspicion. Abul Fazl was seized by the conviction that they were getting into deep water, and the consequence of this Mogor's presence among them would be immense and not necessarily to their benefit. But when he attempted to caution his master against the new involvement of the world's most frightening man, with no exception, waved his worries away. The letter is charming, and so is the one who reads it, Akbar said. Bring him to our private rooms tomorrow so that we can speak further. The audience was over. The sudden infatuation of Emperor Jalabdin Akbar with his female mirror image Queen Jalabad Glorina I resulted in a stream of love letters which were carried to England by accredited royal messengers and were never answered. The rhapsodic letters bore the emperor's personal seal and were of an emotional intensity and sexual explicitness that was unusual in Europe and in Asia of that period. Many of these letters failed to reach their destination because the messengers were waylaid by enemies along the way, and from Kabul to Cairo, these intercepted outpourings provided rich amusement for nobles and princes delighted by the Emperor of India's crazy declaration of undying affection for a woman he has never met, as well as his megalomania fantasies of creating a joint global empire that united the eastern and western hemispheres. These letters that did arrive at Whitehall Palace were treated as forgeries or the work of pseudonymous crank, and their carriers were given short shrift, many of them ending up in jail as a poor reward for their long and dangerous journey. After a time, they were simply refused admission, and those who managed to limp back across the world to Fatehpur Sikri returned with embittered words. That queen is a virgin because no man would wish to lie with so cold a fish, they reported. And a year and a day And after a year and a day, Akbar's love vanished so swiftly and mysteriously as it had appeared, perhaps because of the revolt of the queens, who were united for once beloved, behind his non-existent beloved, to threaten the withdrawal of their favors unless he stopped sending fancy letters to that Englishwoman whose silence coming after her own initial blandishments had aroused the emperor's interest, proved the insincerity of her character and the folly of attempting to understand such an alien and unattractive personage, especially when so many more loving and desirable ladies were so much closer to hand. Near the end of his long reign, many years after the time of the charlatan Mogol the Amor had passed, the aging emperor nostalgically remembered the strange affair of the letter from the Queen of England and asked to see it again. When it was brought to him and translated by a different interpreter, much of the original text had disappeared. The surviving document was found no references to his infallibility or the Pope's, nor did it ask for alliance against a common foe. It was in fact no more than a plain request for good trading terms for the English merchants, accompanied by some routine expressions of respect. When the emperor learned the truth, he understood all over again how daring a sorcerer he had encountered on that long ago morning after the dream of the crow. But then, however, the knowledge was of no use to him except to remind him that what should never be forgotten, that witchcraft requires no potions, familiar spirits, or magic wands. Language upon a silver tongue affords enchantment enough. We've got to the next chapter, chapter number 6, when the sword of the tongue is drawn. When the sword of the tongue is drawn, the emperor thought, it inflicts deeper cuts than that of a servant's sharpest blade. If he needed proof, it was to be found in the way of the philosopher. It was found in the war of the philosophers that took place each day in this very place. The embroidered and the mirror worked tent of the new worship. There was constant hub there, the noise of the kingdom's finest thinkers pushing one another dreadfully with their words. Akbar had kept the vow he had made on the day that he chopped up the insolent Rana of Kuch Nahin and had created a debating chamber in which the adoration of the divine was reimagined as an intellectual wrestling match in which no holes were barred. He invited Mughal Del Amor to accompany him on to the tent where he could show off his new invention, impress upon the newcomer the splendid originality and progressiveness of the Mughal court, and incidentally demonstrate the Jesuit sent by Portugal and that they were the only Westerners to have access to the imperial ear. Indeed, inside the tent, the participants reclined on carpets and bolsters, grouped into two camps, the water drinkers and the wine lovers, who faced each other across a nave which was empty except for the seats of the emperor and his guests. The Mongol party, containing the religious thinkers and the mystics, drank only water, while the opponents, the Makul, Makul, celebrated pure philosophy, and the scientists and poured wine down their throats all day long. Abul Fazl and Raja Birbal were here today, both seated as usual among the wine fanciers. Prince Salim too was visiting, a surly teenager presents alongside the puritanical water-only leader Badoni, a thin line of a man, one of the young men who seemed to have been born old, who detested the older Abul Fazl and was heavily loathed by that spherical worthy in return. Arguments raged between them in terms so impertinent, fat sycophant, tedious termite, that the emperor found himself wondering much discord could ever lead in how much discord could ever lead to harmony he sought was his harmony he sought. Was freedom indeed the road to unity, or was chaos its inevitable result? Akbar had decided that the revolutionary people would not be a revolutionary temple would not be a permanent building. Argument itself and no deity, however multi-limbed or almighty, would here be the only God. But reason was a moral divinity, a God that died, and even if it was subsequently reborn, it inevitably died again. Ideas were like the tides of the sea on phases of the moon. They came into being, rose and grew in their proper time, and then ebbed and darkened and vanished when the great wheel turned. They were temporary dwellings like the tents, and a tent was their proper home. Mughal tent makers were geniuses in their own way, creating collapsible houses of great complexity and beauty. When the army marched in, it was accompanied by a second army of 2,500 men, to say nothing of the elephants and camels who raised and lowered the little city tent in which the king and his men resided. These portable pagodas, pavilions, and palaces had inspired the stonemasons of Sikri, but a tent was still a tent, a thing of cloth, canvas, and wood that well represented the impermanence of things of the mind. One day, 100 years from now, when even his greatest empire was no more, yes, in this place, he was willing to forget even the destruction of his own creation. His descendants would see the tent pulled down and all his glory vanish. Only when we accept the truth of death, the emperor declared, can we begin to learn the truths of being alive. Okay, I'm going to take a break here. Uh, we've done a few pages, and what did we gain here? We finished one chapter, chapter 5 also, and moved to chapter 6. So the Mughal de Amor, as he calls himself, gets an audience with Abul Fazl. Abul Fazl is somebody who's extremely smart, aware of the ways of the world, and he could sense that this guy was a charlatan, especially because of the perfumes that he was wearing, and he burst that bubble instantly. He told him that you're wearing a lovely perfume, and I'm sure that is what has attracted everybody to you. And the minute he said that, the guards who let him in, the slave girls who were pampering him, all of them rose out of their spell. And the yellow hat traveler also realized that he had met his match as far as the court of the emperor was concerned, and now truth, or closer to truth, was what he could save him. And then Abul Fazl started asking him questions about the Queen of England. He was trying to kind of grill him and say that the Queen was not a friend of the King of Spain, who was their friend, and they had not heard good things about England and the Queen from their contacts in Portugal, which is basically Goa. Goa was part of Portugal, the Portuguese colony, and Mughal del Amor kept defending it very smartly. He started bad mouthing Spain, and he called the Portuguese pirates, and even when he was told that the priest from Goa was an Italian, he said it doesn't matter whether they're Italians or Spanish. Once they are part of the Goan Empire, they become Portuguese, and as Portuguese they are swines. They are somebody you should not trust them, and so on and so forth. And he started comparing the Queen to Akbar and Akbar to the Queen, to the extent of saying that Akbar could be a reflection of the Queen in the East. This everybody found funny. Abul Fazl did not find it funny. He said, if you were not an ambassador, we could throw you to the elephants for just making that statement. The emperor found it funny. Now the emperor was sitting on top listening to all of it. There was only a curtain or a tent or a kind of canopy which was keeping him away at that point of time. So he pulled the string and the canopy fell down, and now everybody could see him. And he introduces himself, and Ucello or Mogol de Amor realizes that he's in the presence of the king, and he's finally made it. Without wasting much time, the emperor asks him to read his letter. The young traveler reads a letter, or he makes up a letter rather, and then he translates it into Persian and explains to the king. The letter talks about an alliance, and the letter talks about making an alliance between the East and the West, which is between England and the kingdom of Akbar, and not to trust the Bishop of Rome, who were sending all their Catholic people to convert the world, as they were doing it in Kambaya, which is how people in England pronounced Akbar's kingdom. In fact, they call him Ikabar, and instead of Jalaluddin, which was his name, they called him Jalabdin, which all of which Abul Fazl and Akbar found very funny. And so basically the letter was kind of like an alliance. Akbar found it even more funny. He said, why don't you think we should marry this virginal queen from England? And Abul Fazl, Mughal Amor said, why not? And uh, Akbar took it seriously and he started writing letters. So there were letters which have been passed on between, which were rather not passed on, which have been sent to England, which came back without any reply. So what was happening the other side is something that Salman Rushdie kind of talks about, which is the letters were going to England. People did not believe in England that some of the letters first of all didn't reach, because on the way people kind of intercepted it and they had a hearty laugh about this emperor from India who had a fondness for the Queen of England. And whatever reached England, the people did not trust that it had actually come from an emperor in India. Some of the messengers who were expecting a big reward were jailed in England itself. Some who managed to escape or were let go came back to Fatehpur Sikri, and obviously uh, uh, the kingdom was upset that they came without a proper response. Over a period of time, Akbar's fascination for the queen dropped, and uh, all his queens, all his harem, and all his ladies protested against this fascination or infatuation for a Western English, or for an English woman. They did not like it, and slowly Akbar's interest also vanished. On a side note, many years later, Akbar, in his old age, thinks about this letter and asks for it to be picked up. And he gets somebody who knows the language to read it all over again. And there was nothing in it that Mughal Amor had spoken about, of alliance, of marriage, and so on and so forth. It was a boring old document about doing trade deals, and Akbar found it very funny, and he found it ironic that at that point of time he understood why Mughal Amor, he believed him, because that guy was enchanting and he uh, had his way with words. So this is where we kind of will stop, and I know that we're reading a bit slowly and it's not going in the speed that I would like, but I hope you're enjoying listening to the reading of the book. If you have any comments, do drop them in the comment section. I will see you again in the next video. Till then, stay awesome, take care, goodbye.